Hello, listeners, and welcome to episode 142 of the Nigeria Football Weekly podcast. Me, your host, Olu Oke. And today, I want to do an episode focusing on the Women's Africa Cup of Nations tournament, which will be taking place in Morocco. It's the first edition being taking place in about 3 years since the last edition in Morocco. And it kicks off on this Saturday, which will be the 5th of July. And we've got the Super Falcons also kicking off their game on Sunday, which will be the 5th of July. So I'll just be talking about the tournament, Super Falcons expectations and predictions for this year's competitions, and then I'll be doing a quick roundup on transfer news involving some of our Nigerian players. So without any further ado, the Women's AFCON is here, and boy, are we excited. Shout out to Nike for the new drip for the women. I think they've hit it out of the park in terms of the kits, so hopefully the players can do the kid proud in Morocco. As you know, we're scheduled to begin our quest for our 10th Women's African Cup of Nations title this weekend. Nigeria will be playing on Sunday evening against Tunisia, 5 p.m. Nigeria time. The Super Falcons are in Group B alongside Tunisia, Algeria, and Botswana. Nigeria will be aiming to win our 10th title since the competition became a biennial competition under the WAFCON name. We previously won it in 1991 and 1995 when it was called the African Women's Championship. After changing to the Women's AFCON name, Nigeria has won the tournament 9 times, by far the most of anybody else. There have only been 12 editions of the tournament and we've won it 9 times. Equatorial Guinea have won it twice, I think in 2008 and 2012. And then South Africa won the last edition, which took place in Morocco. Apart from that, Nigeria have won it every other time. 1998, 2000, 2002, 2004, 2006, 2010, 2014, 2016, and 2018. Remember the days of Perpetua Nkocha and Messia Akidi? From time, we've been dominating women's football in Africa. But of course, it's not as easy as it was anymore. There was no edition held in 2020, and we finished 4th in the 2022 edition, which took place in Morocco. If you remember that tournament, Nigeria actually did pretty well because in the semi-final against Morocco, who were the hosts, we actually played with 9 players, 9 against 11, and I think we took them all the way to penalty shootout, or we lost on extra time, one of the two, and obviously Morocco had home advantage. So obviously our players will be looking to lick their wounds, and we've got quite a few of the players who played in that tournament who are still available for selection for this 2025 edition of the tournament. Obviously, just based on history, Nigeria are the favorites for this tournament. Any way you slice this bread, Nigeria are the favorites. We have the best players in terms of playing in the top teams, both in the NWSL in America and all the top leagues in Europe. When you even look at the upcoming teams, South Africa, your Zambias, your Moroccos, they don't quite have the same firepower of Nigeria on the continent. When it comes to just pure talent and the level of the team, there's really no excuse for the Super Falcons not to win our 10th title. It must be said, though, the NFF has not done the team any favors, giving them less time to prepare for the tournament. The Super Falcons were inactive for 2 whole international windows this year, and they only played 3 games to prepare. Obviously, we played against Cameroon on the 3rd of June, which we won 2-0. We also played Portugal, which I brought to you on the podcast. We drew 0-0 against quite a good team who are also playing the Women's Euros taking place. And we drew 0-0 with Chiamaka Nnadozie having to make quite a host of saves. And the 3rd game was on Sunday, this past Sunday, where we played our biggest rivals, Ghana, and beat them 3-1 in a continental warm-up game for the tournament. Now, who's in the Super Falcons WAFCON squad list? Just to refresh your memory, we have star goalkeeper Chiamaka Nnadozie, long-time backup Tochukwu Eluehi is also in the team. And we have Rachel Onuachu, who round up the goalkeepers. Defenders, a lot of the usual big hitters. Osinachi Ohale is in there. Michelle Alozie is in there. Ashley Promptree is in there. And we also have Tosin Deme, who's been a mainstay in the past few years after playing the Under-20 tournament recently. We've also got Sikiratu Isa and Miracle Usani in the team, and Shukurat Oladakbo, who make up the defenders for the national team. In midfield, a lot of the usual names you'd expect. Captain Rashidat Ajibade, Halimatu Ayinde, Deborah Abiodun, very, very good player. Jennifer Echegini, who's had a very, very good season this past season. I think it was for PSG or was it Juventus? But she's doing her thing. Tony Payne, mainstay in the squad, you know, the Everton player. And Christy Ochebu, who's arguably one of the most, if not the most consistent Super Falcons player over the past 3-4 years. She continues to win titles every year for her club, Benfica. And then forward line, a lot of the big hitters, spearheaded by Asisat Oshoala, you know, multiple time African Footballer of the Year. Francisca Odega, who's also one of the older heads in the team, so to speak. Chinwedu Hizwe, Ifeoma Onumonu, who's always been in the team in the past few tournaments. Esther Okoronkwo, Rinsola Babajide, who has become a mainstay in the past year or two since switching allegiance from England. And we've got Folashade Ijamilusi, who's looking to make her debut at the tournament. And also Chioma Okafo, who was eligible to play for both Nigeria and Malawi, but of course has chosen to play for the Super Falcons of Nigeria. When are our fixtures? Like I said, our first game is on Sunday, 5 p.m., July 6th against Tunisia. And then we play Botswana on Thursday, July 10th at 8 p.m. kickoff. And then we finish up the group next week, Sunday, by playing Algeria 8 p.m. Now, just looking at the group Nigeria has, with all due respect to our opponents, this is the kind of group that Nigeria should really be. How do you say this in a nice way? We should be whitewashing the group. Nigeria should win all 3 games. Like, in fact, and it should not be close. You know, when you look at the level of the teams in our group, their pedigree, even their recent results, you know, like it's Tunisia, for example, you know, there's really no excuse for Nigeria not to be getting maximum points from this group. So that's definitely the expectation for the Super Falcons over our 3 games in this tournament. Now, what else do we have to look forward to in the other groups? There's 3 groups, so there's 12 teams. In Group A, we'll see DR Congo, Morocco, who are the hosts, and of course finished second in the last tournament, losing South Africa in the final. Senegal are also in the tournament, and Zambia. Zambia, we remember, beat Nigeria in the 3rd place playoff in the last tournament. They've got the likes of Barbara Banda, who's the most famous player, and they're one of the better teams on the African continent by all measure when it comes to women's football. In Group B, we have our group, which I've already gone through, who we're playing, and then Group C, we'll see Ghana, South Africa, the defending champions, Mali as well, and finally rounded up by Tanzania, who have also qualified for the tournament. So just quick tournament predictions for me. Who do I think will progress from each group? This is a tricky one because the top 2 from each of the 3 groups will qualify, and then the 2 worst 3rd place teams from the 3 groups will also qualify. So I expect Morocco and Zambia to finish 1st and 2nd in Group A. I expect Nigeria to finish top in our group, and it's a bit of a hard one to call between Tunisia, Botswana and Algeria, but because they're playing in North Africa, I'll give the slight edge to the Tunisians. They recently lost 3-1 to Morocco, who are by far better than them, but when you look at their results compared to the other teams, it's hard to say. Maybe Botswana could come second. I don't know too much about them, in all honesty, like I would for men's football, because I watch a lot more of the Super Falcons or the South Africas or the Moroccos, but that's what I think so far. And then Group C, will definitely see South Africa qualify top of the group, and I think it's pretty much free for all in terms of who comes second. I would likely give the edge to Ghana, but if I could look at 3rd place teams to qualify, I think our group, Algeria will finish 3rd. I think we could also see the Senegalese finish 3rd in Group A, and also Mali. So I'll give it to the West African team. So 2 of those 3 teams I expect to make the quarterfinals of this tournament. So Algeria, Mali, or Senegal. Who do we expect to see in the semifinals? Based on the way that the groups have been structured, whoever wins Group A faces one of the best losers from Group B or C, and then the runner-up from Group B will play the runner-up from Group C. Sorry, it's a bit complicated. The winner of Group B, which is Nigeria's group, will then play the runner-up from Group A, which is likely to be Zambia. And then the group winner of Group C is likely to play one of these 2 3rd-place teams from Group A or B. So what does that look at right now? I think when I could predict a semi-final lineup, Morocco will likely play Algeria or Mali in the quarterfinals. Tunisia will play Ghana in the quarterfinals. Nigeria will play Zambia because Group A is one of the tougher groups, Morocco and Zambia, and we have to play the runner-up from one of those groups. We are not going to play one of the best third-place teams, so that already makes our quarterfinal tie very tricky. You know, it will either be Zambia or Morocco likely, and then finally South Africa will play either Algeria or Senegal. So what does the semi-final lineup look like for me right now in terms of predictions? I think Morocco will play Tunisia or Ghana. More likely to be Ghana, to be fair, considering Tunisia has less pedigree. So you could see a world where Morocco will play Ghana in the semi-final, and the second semi-final will be Nigeria playing against defending champion South Africa, who are becoming quickly one of our biggest rivals on the continent, both for men and women's. When you look how often we have to play them, you know, the last AFCON for the men's, the World Cup qualifiers for the men's, even the women's. I remember South Africa beating us recently just before that 2022 women's AFCON. And they're one of the teams that we have to look out for. And when it comes to women's football, I'd even say Nigeria and South Africa are a bit more equal compared to the men's, where we clearly have the better players, but of course South Africa have the better structure, and it would be a shame if we lose to them to get the World Cup ticket. So, who do I predict to finish third place? South Africa, third place for me. Second place, I believe Morocco will finish second. And of course, winners, I have to predict the Super Falcons. This one is not even just by us. We have the talent, we have the players, and we have the history and the depth. My only main concern is we have a new manager, Madugu, and he's only been there for a few games. And when you watch the way we played against Portugal, it left a lot to be desired, let's put it that way. But I don't think we'll face any opponents as strong as Portugal in the women's AFCON. So that should still put us in good stead to win the tournament. Golden Boot winner, it's a bit hard to predict right now because a lot of it could depend on how much the big teams whip the whipping girls of the tournaments. But if I'm predicting Nigeria to win, then I think our most settled and consistent attacker is our captain, Rasheedat Ajibade. Hazard Shola at this stage of her career does not start every game. You know, we can't quite be sure if Rinsola Babajide would start, or, you know, certain players, even in attack, will it be Onomonu, will it be Hezuo? So I like to just believe that Rasheedat Ajibade would, you know, put on a captain's performance throughout the tournament, taking inspiration from Trustekong from the last AFCON for the men's, and emerge as the Golden Boot winner / best player as well. Surprise package, I think it would be one of Algeria or Tunisia or Ghana. You know, when you look at the way the groups are set up, there is a world where whoever finishes second in our group, which I think could be Tunisia, will find themselves having to play second place from Group C, which I think will be Ghana. So either Tunisia or Ghana will end up making the semi-final, which I think will be a surprise and good for one of those teams. I think the biggest letdown, unfortunately, nothing to do with their competency or how good they are, but I think it will be Zambia. I think just purely luck of the draw. They're in Group A with the host Morocco, so they're likely to finish second. And for finishing second, they get a gift-wrapped tie in the quarterfinals against, more than likely, the Super Falcons of Nigeria. Don't get me wrong, Zambia beat us in the last AFCON in the third place playoff, but Nigeria, when you're used to winning and finishing first, playing a third place playoff must be very annoying. So I think Zambia, unfortunately, their road will end in the quarterfinals, which will be a slight letdown considering the pedigree of the women's national team. And finally, just to round up the podcast before I touch on the exile for Tunisia, just to touch on a few star players to be aware about in the tournament. Of course, Nigeria, we have Asisat Oshoala, prolific striker throughout her career. You know, she scored 7 goals in 2024, but she's experiencing a drought early in 2025. She's still the 5-time African Footballer of the Year, so we have to give her respects. Chiamaka Nnadozie, the Nigeria goalkeeper, former Paris FC player who recently signed for Brighton in WSL, kept 11 clean sheets in 26 league games this past season for Paris FC. Of course, we've got our captain Rasheedat Ajibade at Atletico Madrid. She just left them this summer. She scored 7 goals and made 3 assists last season in 22 Liga Feminine games. She won the Player of the Month in September 2024 as well, and netted a hat-trick in the Madrid derby against Real Madrid. And then, of course, Christy Uchebo, who's the linchpin of our midfield. Midfield anchor at Benfica as well. Played 12 matches this past season and helped her club win the league and cup double. And she was also named into the Portuguese league team of the season. For South Africa, Hilda Magaya, winger versatile forward, well known for WAFCON's performances in 2022 as well as 2023 Women's World Cup heroics. She scored 2 goals and made 1 assist in that World Cup, which was quite impressive for South Africa. And they've also got Linda Mothlalo, who's a creative midfielder with penalty precision. Had a brief spell in Racing Louisville in America, but is reportedly changing clubs as well. For Morocco, they've got Gislan Shebak, veteran leader and the Women's AFCON top goal scorer in 2022. She plays for AS FAR, who are the best team in Morocco. She's known for her experience, vision, and set-piece threat. Also, they've got Fatima Tagnal, also a dynamic player for AS FAR, consistent performer in the CAF Champions League and Moroccan domestic competitions. Also, I just wanted to touch on Zambia. As I said, Barbara Banda, star striker known for her Olympic hat-trick, scored back-to-back hat-tricks in the Olympics. Recently signed with Orlando Pride. Physical, fast, and lethal in front of goal. In fact, one of the best players in the world. Also, you could say the same for Rachel Kundanaji. She's versatile forward for Bay FC, scored 5 goals and made 4 assists in the 2024 NWSL season. She is a teammate of Azat Oshola at Bay FC and is one of Africa's most expensive transfers ever. So those are a few of the key players from the big teams, or the favorites, I would say. Also, just to give some props to our neighbors, Ghana, they do have a player, Princella Adubia. She plays in Ghana for Hasakas Ladies, scored key goals in qualifiers and a very focal forward. And they've got Mary Amponsa, who plays for the Ampem Dakoa Ladies. 37 caps, 24 goals. I mean, what a return. Any way you want to slice this bread. Women's Footballer of the Year 2023 as well. I think this was in Ghana. So those are the players to really be aware about in terms of the Women's AFCON. I think it's very exciting. It's always fun to watch Super Falcons play in a big tournament, and it'll be nice to see them defend their crown over in Morocco. So what are my predictions for the first game against Tunisia on Sunday? Because of the very few friendlies our team has been able to play, and the fact that the coach Magudo has experimented in his lineups in both friendlies, especially against Portugal and Ghana. So it's very hard to predict what the starting lineup of the team would be like over the game on Sunday against Tunisia. But we know for a fact Chiamaka Nnadozie will start, that's for sure. We know that Ashley Plumter will definitely start. I would say she's our best defender, even though she hasn't played some of the non-tournament games. But the thing is, remember in the World Cup, Randy Waldron played Plumter as a right back, or was he left back? She played as a fullback. So I think she may have to play as fullback again in this tournament, just because our fullback's not the strongest. And then we'll see Alozie also play as fullback. So Alozie and Plumter as fullbacks, and then we'll see Osinachi Ohale and Tosi Demehi continue in centre back as the centre back pairing. I think Abiodun has to start. Very, very good player playing America, and Uchebo will definitely start. So those be my midfield anchor, although you're not sure how it would end up being patched together. I would say the cam would either be Jennifer Echegini or Tony Payne. Tony Payne also started one of the friendlies as a right winger, so it's hard to see. But I think one of them will play as a cam. And then we'll definitely see the captain, Rashidat Ajibade, start as one of the wingers, or maybe even as the cam. And I hope, rather than expect, that Rinsola Babajide also gets to start in one of the wing positions. And then striker, of course, we have Azizat Oshoala, but when you look at our last few tournaments, Ifeoma Onumonu has been given the nod in quite a lot of games to start for the national team. I think she brings a bit more presence with her physique, and also she's just a better link-up player. We have to admit that Oshoala is at the twilight of her career. Can we say that? So I would not be surprised if we see Onumonu start, but also there's a world where Oshoala will end up starting the game. So that's my starting XI for the game. As for the Tunisians, their recent games, as I said, recently they lost to Morocco 3-1 in a friendly in April. In February, they played games against Kenya at home and away. Away against Kenya, they drew 0-0 to Kenya, and then they lost 1-0 at home to Kenya in February. After that, you have to go all the way back to July to see their last set of games. Tunisia beat Botswana 1-0, so that could be interesting because considering both teams are in our group. But prior to that, they lost 5-0 to Tanzania away. So that's just to give you an idea of Tunisia's level. That aside, they do have a few players to be aware about because we must know about our opponents. They've got a forward called Mariam Huij. Houij. Prolific striker for the Tunisian national team. She's got 15 goals in 45 caps. And then she also clinched the Turkish league title with ALG Spor a few years ago and is now shining in her Saudi club, Abba, with 16 goals in 11 matches. They've also got a player called Gada Ayadi, forward/attacking midfielder who plays for Al Nassr in Saudi Arabia's women's team. She scored +5 goals in 10 plus appearances. Regular Tunisian national team starter, having played in friendlies against all their various opponents. They've got a left back called Samia Aouni, strong defender and part of the dominant Al Nassr team in the Saudi league. Remember, Plumter also plays in the Saudi league, but Al Nassr are the current champions, I believe. Also, Samia Aouni was named in the WAFCON group stage best XI at the last AFCON. So it shows her defensive and offensive value. And then finally, they've got a striker called Hannah Hamdi, dual German-Tunisian footballer. She has scored 1 goal in just 2 senior caps, but she's showing her emerging potential and is one for us to watch in the game on Sunday. Predictions for the game, because we're not quite settled yet and the team gets better as the tournament goes on, I expect Nigeria to win this game comfortably. I'll say 3-0. I don't want to, in terms of who scores, Ajibade, if she's going to be top goal scorer, she needs to get firing. So I'll say Ajibade gets at least 2 goals, and then I think either an Onumonu or an Ajibade or a Babajide will join in with the third goal in this game. So my prediction is 3-0 to Nigeria, and we're very excited to watch the game on Sunday. So that's it in terms of women's AFCON preview. Just to round up the podcast, a few transfer news for you to be aware about. Chiamaka Nnadozie, who will be playing on Sunday, has recently signed for Brighton in the WSL, which is the Women's Super League and the professional league in England. She signed for Brighton after the expiration of her contract at Paris FC. It's an interesting move for me because I feel like she's good enough to play for any of the big 4 teams in the women's game in England. And when I say the big 4, you have Arsenal, the European champions, Chelsea, who have won the league, I think, the past 4 years in a row, Manchester City, who are also perennially around the top and playing the Champions League, and also Manchester United, who have done a good job in the past few years of bringing their women's team to prominence. So Brighton are not one of the best teams in the WSL, but also they're an ambitious team and a very well-run club. So I believe at the very least, looking at positive, she'll get the opportunity to establish herself in the WSL and get into the wider consciousness, which seems crazy considering that her Paris FC team knocked Arsenal out of not this year's Champions League, but the Champions League before, after her heroics in penalties. So it's quite annoying that she wasn't maybe sought after by bigger clubs, but I guess that's the price we pay for our reputation and not, tooting the horn of our players as well as some of these other national teams. So that's exactly what Nigeria Football Weekly is trying to do in terms of bridging that gap. So let's see how she gets on in that one. I'll be watching games when I can. I think it's always exciting when you have players playing one of the more popular leagues in the world, and it can only do her reputation and her confidence a world of good. So we wish her all the best in that game. Paul Onuachu has also moved back to Trabzonspor from Southampton on a permanent deal. He just arrived in Turkey recently to complete the deal. Remember, Paul Onuachu was on loan at Trabzonspor, not this past season, but in the 2023/2024 season. In 21 appearances, he scored 15 goals and 4 assists. He even became Trabzonspor's 7th top goal scorer in the league, ever, with these 15 goals. So Turkish Cup, he also got 2 goals in 4 games, and overall he scored 17 goals in 25 matches, adding 4 assists. I also remember he scored 1 goal that was almost like a Pushkash award contender. So basically, he did very well at Trabzonspor in his first spell. So go where you're loved. Don't come and be slaving in Southampton where they're finishing 20th, all in the name of Premier League football. I like this move a lot for Onuachu. He's not getting any younger. He needs to go where he's loved. He needs to play games. He needs to continue to do what he does best, which is score goals. You could argue he's a big fish in a small pond. Sometimes it's better that way for a player. He's done his best work when he played for Genk, or was it Ghent in Belgium, and he destroyed the league, and now he could go back and do it in Turkey. Safe to say that the Premier League is maybe a bit of a step too high for him, but you gotta do what you gotta do. There's a lot of football to be played, a lot of countries where you could play football to a good level. So we wish Paul Onuachu all the best. And finally, it looks like Fisayo Dele-Bashiru will be staying at Lazio. He was on loan from Spor last season, and it looks like Lazio will be signing him permanently. So congrats to him, but we want to wait for an official statement. He wasn't able to play consistently last season. He got injured at some point, which did not help. But of course, Lazio now have Maurizio Sarri back at the helm as their manager. So let's see if he gets a chance to prove himself, and if he could even become one of the favorites of Maurizio Sarri. I personally like Fisayo Dele-Bashiru because I think he's a player that takes his chances. Look at the work he's done in Super Eagles in 5 or 6 caps. He already has 2 goals, wearing the number 10 shirt, playing well whenever he's called upon, scoring crucial goals as well. So this is a player that I have a lot of love for, and I wish him all the best in his career. So hopefully he'll end up staying in Lazio, because we want our best players in the top leagues playing for better clubs, which Lazio still are. They're still one of the top 7-8 teams in Serie A. So that's it in terms of Fisayo Dele-Bashiru. So that's it for this episode of the podcast. Next week we'll be bringing you a review of the first game against Tunisia that will be taking place on Sunday, and then also we'll be looking to do some things interesting in terms of Nigerian players to look out for going into next season, or players who need a transfer. There's a lot of content to bring out, so look out for that space, dropping likely on Tuesday next week. Until next time, I've been your host, Oluoke. Please make sure you support the Super Falcons. They deserve it. In fact, when it comes to trophies, na them they reign, na them they bring trophy to Nigeria past anybody else. So please, get behind the girls, support the team. And by God's grace, in just under 4 weeks' time, we'll be celebrating yet another tournament win for the Super Falcons. Until next time, take care and enjoy all the football, well, Club World Cup and whatever's still available. Ciao, ciao, and I'll see you on the next episode. Thanks for watching this video. Please like, share, subscribe, and click the bell to get a notification whenever we drop the video. You can also find our social media channels listed below. And of course, up Super Eagles and Nigeriano they ever carry last.